Often when we think of villains in ancient stories, our minds turn to kings and warriors. However, there exists a group of characters whose actions and legacies are as impactful as those of their male counterparts, the malevolent queens of the Bible. This script delves into the lives of some of the most notorious queens who, through their actions and decisions, shaped the course of biblical history in ways that continue to resonate to this day. The Bible, a book filled with moral lessons, stories of faith, and examples of conduct, also tells us about individuals who chose paths of darkness and wickedness. Among these, some queens stand out who not only wielded considerable power, but did so in a way that brought destruction and deviation to the peoples of Israel and Judah. These queens, with their palace intrigues, idolatry, and murders, not only encouraged their husbands to follow wrongful paths, but also acted independently to secure their own interests and strengthen their pagan practices. Jezebel and Athaliah emerge as prominent names, embodying cruelty and manipulation. Jezebel, with her drive for the introduction and spread of Baal worship, brought idolatry and persecution to the prophets of the Lord. Athaliah, in turn, upon the death of her son, did not hesitate to murder the entire royal lineage in an effort to secure her power, showing a thirst for control that led to ruin. These narratives are not just stories of the past. They make us reflect on power, morality, and the consequences of our actions. By delving into the stories of these malevolent queens, we are invited to consider not just the historical and religious aspects of these accounts, but also the lessons they can teach us about leadership, ethics, and the constant struggle between good and evil. Jezebel, the queen of Israel, is one of the most notorious figures in the Bible, whose story is marked by actions that go against the laws and divine principles established. Her marriage to Ahab, the king of Israel, represents one of the clearest examples of direct disobedience to God's instructions for his people. This event is not just an isolated act of defiance, but the beginning of a series of decisions that would lead Israel down a path of idolatry and moral decay. The divine law was explicit regarding the matrimonial alliances of the Israelites with foreign nations. In Deuteronomy 7:3-4, God commanded the Israelites, "Do not intermarry with them, do not give your daughters to their sons or take their daughters for your sons, for they will turn your children away from following me to serve other gods, and the Lord's anger will burn against you and will quickly destroy you." This verse clearly sets out the consequences of marrying idolatrous peoples. Disobedience would result in God's wrath and the potential destruction of the people of Israel. Ahab, by taking Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians, as his wife, disregards this commandment, 1 Kings 16:31. The biblical text highlights that Ahab's act was considered worse than all the sins of his predecessors, indicating the severity of his action. Ethbaal, whose name means "with Baal," was a priest of Astarte and promoted the worship of Baal, a pagan god. By marrying Jezebel, Ahab not only united with an idolatrous family, but also introduced and promoted the worship of foreign gods in Israel, a direct betrayal of the first commandment that demands exclusive fidelity to the Lord, Exodus 23. The marriage of Jezebel and Ahab marked a turning point for Israel, inaugurating a period of apostasy and spiritual decline. Jezebel was not a mere bystander. She actively promoted idolatry, built a temple for Baal in Samaria, and supported hundreds of prophets of Baal and Asherah at the kingdom's expense, 1 Kings 18:19. These actions not only challenged God's laws, but also undermined the faith of the people of Israel, leading them to abandon worship of the Lord in favor of pagan gods. The story of Jezebel and Ahab is a powerful testament to the consequences of disobeying divine orders. It serves as a grim reminder that deviating from the paths set by God can lead to disastrous results, both on a personal and national level. Through this narrative, the Bible teaches us about the importance of obedience, faithfulness to God, and the grave consequences that can arise from rejecting His commandments. Jezebel not only encouraged the worship of Baal, but also persecuted the prophets of the Lord, seeking to eliminate the worship of the God of Israel and completely replace it with idolatry. 1 Kings 18:4 reports that Jezebel was killing off the prophets of the Lord, an act that demonstrates her commitment to eradicating monotheistic faith in favor of her idolatrous practices. This effort to suppress true worship included the support of 450 prophets of Baal and 400 prophets of Asherah, who dined at Jezebel's table, 1 Kings 18:19, a testament to her determination to establish idolatry as the dominant religion in Israel. Jezebel's promotion of idolatry had disastrous consequences for Israel, not only drawing the people away from God, but also attracting divine judgments upon the kingdom. The spiritual battle culminated in the showdown on Mount Carmel, 1 Kings 18:20-40, where the prophet Elijah challenged the prophets of Baal, resulting in the demonstration of the Lord's supreme power and the defeat of Baal worship. This episode serves as a reminder of God's sovereignty and the consequences of idolatry, highlighting the importance of exclusive fidelity to the Lord. Jezebel, the queen of Israel, notorious for her promotion of idolatry, is also remembered for her acts of cruelty, including the murder of Naboth and the relentless persecution of the Lord's prophets. These acts not only cemented her legacy as synonymous with evil, but also precipitated her tragic end as recorded in the scriptures. The episode of Naboth's murder is one of the most striking examples of Jezebel's malevolence. Naboth, a Jezreelite man, owned a vineyard that King Ahab coveted to turn into a garden. When Naboth refused to sell his inheritance, respecting God's law that forbids the permanent sale of land, Leviticus 25:23, Ahab became sullen. It was then that Jezebel intervened, resorting to fraud and murder to satisfy her husband's desire. She orchestrated a vile plan, writing letters in Ahab's name to the elders and nobles of the city, instructing them to falsely accuse Naboth of blasphemy and then execute him, 1 Kings 21:8-14. After Naboth's death, Jezebel informed Ahab that he could take possession of the vineyard, demonstrating her willingness to commit injustices to achieve her goals. Furthermore, Jezebel is known for her persecution of the Lord's prophets. Her attempt to exterminate the worshippers of the true God of Israel is evidenced when Elijah states that she killed many of the Lord's prophets, 1 Kings 18:4. This action not only shows her commitment to the spread of idolatry, but also her desire to eradicate any trace of worship of the God of Israel, replacing it with the worship of Baal and Asherah. The end of Jezebel is narrated with grim details, serving as a testimony to the divine judgment on her wickedness. In 2 Kings 9:30-37, Jezebel faces Jehu, anointed by God to end the house of Ahab. Even in her final moments, Jezebel attempts to maintain her dignity, painting her eyes and adorning her head, but upon facing him, she is thrown out of the window by her own servants at Jehu's command. Her death is marked by Elijah's prophecy, which predicted that dogs would devour her body in Jezreel, a condemnation fitting the severity of her iniquities, 1 Kings 21:23. Jezebel's legacy as synonymous with evil is reiterated in the New Testament, where her name is invoked in Revelation 2:20 as a symbol of falsehood, immorality, and idolatry. This reference reinforces the memory of her nefarious actions and serves as a warning against the dangers of following a similar path of disobedience and opposition to God. The story of Jezebel reminds us of divine justice and the consequences of evil. While her acts of cruelty and idolatry marked a dark period in the history of Israel, her tragic end serves as a powerful reminder that evil will not prevail, and that God, in the end, will restore justice and true worship among his people. Athaliah, the only reigning queen of Judah, is a figure whose actions to maintain power reflect a legacy of violence and despotism, following in the footsteps of her parents, Ahab and Jezebel. Her rise to power and subsequent efforts to keep it at any cost are narratives filled with intrigue, murder, and an unprecedented usurpation of the throne of Judah. Athaliah, the daughter of Ahab and Jezebel, two of the most infamous monarchs of Israel for their promotion of idolatry and opposition to the Lord's prophets, came from a heritage deeply rooted in idolatrous practices and corrupt governance that marked her parents' reign. The connection between Athaliah and her parents sets the context for her own actions as Queen of Judah, suggesting a continuity of evil and disobedience to God. Her marriage to Jehoram, king of Judah, was part of a political alliance between Judah and Israel, but also introduced her family's idolatrous influence into the southern kingdom. 2 Chronicles 21:6 states that Jehoram walked in the way of the kings of Israel, as the house of Ahab had done, for he married a daughter of Ahab. he did evil in the eyes of the Lord. This verse highlights not just Athaliah's malign influence, but also her direct contribution to Judah's spiritual corruption, perpetuating her parents' abominations. Following Jehoram's death and the ascent of her son, Ahaziah, to the throne, Athaliah maintained her influence over the kingdom. However, it was after Ahaziah's premature death that Athaliah took power in a more direct and brutal manner. In an act of unrestrained ambition and a desire to secure her position as ruler of Judah, Athaliah executed all possible heirs to the throne, her own grandchildren, in an attempt to eliminate any challenge to her rule. 2 Kings 11:1 recounts this dark moment. When Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her son was dead, she proceeded to destroy all the royal family. This act of infanticide is among the most atrocious recorded in the Bible, demonstrating the extent of Athaliah's depravity to maintain control over Judah. However, her attempt to extinguish the royal lineage failed due to the bravery of Jehosheba, Ahaziah's sister, who hid Joash, one of the king's sons, thereby saving him from the massacre ordered by Athaliah. For 6 years, Joash remained hidden in the temple of the Lord until a coup led by the priest Jehoiada restored him to the throne, ending Athaliah's tyrannical reign. The overthrow of Athaliah is narrated in 2 Chronicles 23, where her end marks the restoration of worship of the Lord in Judah and the conclusion of one of the darkest periods in the kingdom's history. Athaliah is killed outside the temple of the Lord, an act that symbolizes not just the end of her usurpation, but also the people of Judah's rejection of the idolatry and wickedness she represented. Thus, Athaliah leaves a legacy as a vivid example of the dangers of usurped power and corrupt leadership. Her story serves as a grim reminder of the consequences of disobedience to God and injustice, emphasizing the importance of faithfulness to divine law and justice in leadership. Athaliah, queen of Judah, perpetuated her mother Jezebel's legacy by promoting the worship of Baal, bringing a profoundly negative impact on the kingdom of Judah. Her idolatrous influence exacerbated moral and spiritual corruption, threatening the purity of worship of the Lord among God's people. This dark period in Judah's history is marked by a calculated attempt to eradicate the royal lineage of David, an act that nearly resulted in the extinction of messianic hope. However, divine intervention through Jehosheba and Jehoiada ensured the preservation of the royal lineage and the eventual restoration of true worship. The worship of Baal, introduced into Judah by Athaliah, reflects the direct influence of her mother Jezebel and her father Ahab, known for their devotion to this Canaanite god. Athaliah's practice of idolatry is alluded to in 2 Chronicles 24:7, where it is mentioned that the sons of Athaliah, that wicked woman, had broken up the house of God, and also all the dedicated things of the house of the Lord did they bestow upon the Baals. This verse highlights not just the adoption of idolatrous practices, but also the blatant disrespect for the Lord's temple and its consecrations, replacing them with the worship of false gods. Such desecration evidences the destructive impact of Athaliah's reign on the religious values and practices in Judah, threatening the continuity of Jewish monotheism. The overthrow and death of Athaliah, as well as the crucial role played by Jehosheba and Jehoiada, mark a decisive turning point in the history of Judah. Jehosheba, the sister of King Ahaziah and the aunt of the young Joash, risked her life by hiding the prince from Athaliah, thus saving him from certain death. This act of bravery is described in 2 Kings 11:2, where Jehosheba took Joash, son of Ahaziah, and stole him away from among the king's sons who were being murdered, and put him and his nurse in a bedroom. By hiding Joash in the temple of God for 6 years, Jehosheba and her husband, the high priest Jehoiada, protected the future king until it was safe to claim the throne on his behalf. The conspiracy to overthrow Athaliah culminated in the coronation of Joash, a ceremony meticulously planned by Jehoiada, as detailed in 2 Kings 11:4-12. Jehoiada gathered the captains, the Carites, and the guards, making a covenant with them and revealing Joash as the rightful heir to David's throne. The execution of Athaliah, following her failed attempt to cry treason, is narrated in 2 Kings 11:16, where she is taken outside the temple grounds and killed, putting an end to her reign of terror and idolatry. The restoration of Joash to the throne not only marked the end of Athaliah's rule, but also signified Judah's renewed commitment to the worship of the Lord, steering the kingdom away from the idolatry of Baal. Jehoiada, playing a crucial role in this process, led the religious reform, destroying the temple of Baal and restoring the worship of the Lord, as described in 2 Kings 11:17. 18. This episode highlights the importance of faithful leadership and divine protection over the royal lineage, ensuring the continuity of the Davidic covenant and messianic hope. The story of Athaliah, her overthrow, and the roles of Jehosheba and Jehoiada in preserving the royal lineage illustrate the triumph of fidelity over idolatry and injustice, reaffirming God's unwavering commitment to his people and his promises. Herodias, Queen of Galilee, is a notorious figure in the New Testament for her controversial actions and her malign influence on Herod Antipas. Her marriage to Herod, the subsequent responsibility for the death of John the Baptist, and her manipulation of her daughter and Herod Antipas to achieve her goals are episodes that highlight her ambition and the immorality of her acts. The marriage of Herodias to Herod Antipas was a clear deviation from Mosaic laws, as she was originally married to Philip, Herod's brother. This act of adultery and incest violated Jewish laws, as indicated in Leviticus 18:16 and Leviticus 20:21, which forbid marrying a brother's wife. John the Baptist rebuked Herod for this marriage, stating, "It is not lawful for you to have your brother's wife." Mark 6:18. John's censure of Herod and Herodias for their illicit union highlights the prophet's courage in confronting sin openly, even in the face of temporal power. Herodias, unhappy with John the Baptist's rebuke and his influence, plotted her revenge, which would culminate in the prophet's death. Her antipathy towards John stemmed not only from his moral condemnation, but also because he represented a threat to the legitimacy of her power and position in Herod's court. Mark 6:19-24 recounts how Herodias seized the opportunity during Herod's birthday banquet, manipulating her daughter Salome to ask for John the Baptist's head on a platter. Salome's dance pleased Herod, who, in an impulsive gesture and under the oath made before his guests, promised to grant her any wish. Instructed by her mother, Salome requested John's head, a demand that Herod, though reluctantly, fulfilled to keep his word. Herodias's manipulation of her daughter and Herod Antipas reveals her calculating nature and her willingness to use others to achieve her own ends, without regard for justice or human life. Her ability to influence Herod demonstrates the power she wielded in the court, a power she unscrupulously used to eliminate those she viewed as obstacles to her desires. The death of John the Baptist not only silenced a prominent voice of truth and justice, but also serves as a grim reminder of the consequences of sin and immorality at the highest levels of power. The story of Herodias, with its plots and manipulations, is recorded in the scriptures as a testament to the evil that can prevail when hearts turn away from God and his laws. Herodias is remembered not for her royalty or influence, but for the way her immoral actions impacted those around her, and for the injustice of her request that led to the death of John the Baptist. This episode is a powerful reminder of the need for moral integrity and the courage to confront sin, no matter how powerful the adversary. The narrative of Herodias, Herod, John the Baptist, and Salome encapsulates a drama of passion, power, and divine punishment, illustrating the intricate dynamics of power, moral corruption, and the eternal consequences of actions perpetrated against God's servants. This account invites us to reflect on the importance of faithfulness to divine commandments and to be always ready to stand for the truth, even if it costs us everything. The narratives of Jezebel, Athaliah, and Herodias in biblical history offer profound insights into human nature, power, and the consequences of unchecked ambition. These queens, each in their own way, wielded significant influences in their respective kingdoms, not just through their direct actions, but also through the legacy of wickedness and disobedience to divine laws they left behind. Jezebel is remembered for her fervent promotion of idolatry and for inciting Ahab into wickedness against the people of Israel. Her stubborn opposition to the Lord's prophets, culminating in the infamous episode of Naboth's murder, reveals a relentless disposition to manipulate and control to achieve her goals, marking her as one of the most villainous figures in the Bible. Athaliah, following in the footsteps of her mother Jezebel, did not hesitate to shed blood to secure her power, going to the extent of murdering her own royal offspring. Her reign in Judah is a grim reminder of the depths of human depravity when unbound from ethical and moral values. Herodias, in turn, demonstrates the dangers of manipulation and resentment. Her determination to silence John the Baptist, a vocal critic of her illegitimate marriage to Herod Antipas, highlights her willingness to preserve her position and power at any cost, even if it meant perpetrating one of the most infamous acts in the New Testament. Together, these queens exemplify the destructive impact that immoral leadership and corruption can have on a society. Their stories serve as powerful warnings about the consequences of disobedience to God and the dangers of unchecked ambition. More than that, they underline the importance of justice, integrity, and faithfulness to divine principles. Reflecting on the lives of these queens, it's clear that the legacy they left behind is not one of admiration, but rather a stark warning. Their stories remind us of the constant need for vigilance against the forces of evil and the importance of pursuing a life aligned with the values and commandments set forth by God. Liked the video? Leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss our content.